Hello, hello.
Hello, greetings from
Yes.
Gallifrey's past
And future.
and future.
And sideways. That was the original premise for the show, by the way. There was going to be a past story, a future story, and a sideways story. And they were going to kind of alternate. But then they kind of mostly dropped the sideways. It's certainly not as a regular thing. But they still did a few sideways stories. Like the one where they get shrunk, that's a sideways story. Or the one where they're all in the TARDIS. Or Mind Robber, where they're stuck in a land of fiction or something. Those were all sideways stories. But it never quite became the thing. And then eventually the past ones largely got dropped too. And then they added present to the mix, which was not supposed to be in the original mix. Because if you went to the present, then Ian and Barbara would leave. They're like, we're home. Bye. Later.
Bye, Felicia.
Yes. Yes, so we are here for another episode of Rassilon, Omega, and that other guy.
That other guy.
That other guy, yes, who unfortunately is off in the Matrix looking for more adventures with Plutar. So, and could not be with us today because he's sure that there's more Plutar stories out there somewhere.
Somewhere there's gotta be. Maybe someone will do some. Maybe I'll do some fan fiction because I really liked Plutar despite his aggressive stance at times.
Yes, well, I am looking forward to finding out what you thought of this comic. So, yes. So this is a podcast where we delve into the secrets of the Time Lord and look at Doctor Who stories that elucidate and shine a light on the secrets of the Time Lord, and look at Doctor Who episodes and stories we really just like. But do you have any Doctor Who news?
Just well, it's timey-wimey news. So last week we reviewed we reviewed the Doctor, the Power of the Doctor, because this week this story comes after that. So I'm excited to find out what we thought.
I too am excited to find out what we thought about Power of the Doctor. That's great. Oh no, I am. I'm very. I think I had a dream about Doctor Who last night, because my brain was so grappling with the issues and stuff. So there are headcanon that I want to accept, but I can't accept it because I haven't gotten to see my review of Power of the Doctor yet. But sadly, we are not here to review Power of the Doctor. You will have to go look at our previous episode to find out what we eventually decided about Power of the Doctor. So today, we are going to be taking a look at our first comic book.
Wow, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yes, the backup issue from Doctor Who Marvel's Doctor Who magazine, The Stolen TARDIS. This was originally released in December of 1979 AD in the Humanian era by Marvel Comics as part of Doctor Who magazine, which would run backup comic strips at the back of the magazine in black and white. And in fact, Doctor Who magazine, the comic strip in Doctor Who magazine is pretty much the longest continuous running form of Doctor Who out there. It started in the 1970s and it has never missed an issue. Unlike, say, the TV show, which was canceled in 1989, and the novel line, which has been on and off again, or the Big Finish audios, which didn't start till the late 90s. The comics in the back of Doctor Who magazine have been going steady since the 70s.
That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that.
So you could argue that that's some people see that as a more foundational form of Doctor Who than the novels or the TV show or or the audio dramas. I'm not actually familiar with most of it. Magazines are not really my thing, and so even Doctor Who magazines, I quickly found I just wasn't getting around to reading them. So I never really got in, and comic books haven't really been my thing either. So, this one is definitely on point for our Rassilon, Omega, and that other guy podcast. So I thought we had to cover this one. What you're seeing here is the reprint. The original magazine was published in the UK as Doctor Who magazine, and then then Marvel, when Doctor Who got kind of popular in the mid '80s, they said, "Hey, we've got all these old Doctor Who comics that are in black and white. We could colorize them and print and fairly cheaply crank out Doctor Who comics to sell in the US." For a Doctor Who comic book line. And so they ran this for a few years. I think it started in '84. It apparently didn't sell all that well because they stopped well before they ran out of material from Doctor Who magazine. But this particular issue starts with a Tom Baker story where him and something that's not an Ogron but looks like it was inspired by an Ogron, a werewolf-looking guy, team up to fight Daleks with the help of K9. And so if you've always wondered what would K9 versus Dalek fight look like, this is the comic for you. But the second half of it is a separate comic book story titled The Stolen TARDIS, which has the Doctor kind of playing Crypt Keeper and introducing the story. But the story itself doesn't actually involve the Doctor. Or does it?
I wondered about that.
Many people have wondered about that.
Well, certainly the television series has changed my idea of this. But had I read this in the 70s and 79, I might have wondered if Plutar wasn't somehow related to the Doctor.
Yeah, and honestly, there's still nothing really solid to say that it isn't.
Right.
There is. We know the Doctor barely scraped through the Academy on his second attempt with a 51%. And this shows a guy who tries to get through the Academy and then fails, but then is given another chance. So that fits.
A guy who's very... it also kind of establishes that Time Lords are kind of like basically buffoons that don't know how to fix their own TARDISes, but we see the Doctor doing it all the time, so maybe he was a TARDIS repair person at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also worth noting, that almost works against it because the Hartnell Doctor was always terrible at fixing the TARDIS. So if Plutar's supposed to be a young William Hartnell, he's terrible.
Well, regenerations, it's like a crapshoot, right? Like you never know what you're going to get.
Yes. Just because Plutar is not the William Hartnell Doctor doesn't mean he's not one of those other timeless children who came before the William Hartnell Doctor.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's if you want a headcanon that this is a comic of the Doctor on Gallifrey, you can do that, and there's no real reason anyone can tell you you're wrong. There's even a vague hint in the novel Infinity Doctors that seems to be referencing this comic about the Doctor reading through history of the Gallifrey and finding people who seem to act like him at other points in the past. I guess to get that, cover up the basics, this is written by Steve Moore, who is probably most noteworthy in the worlds of Doctor Who for inventing Absalom Dak, the Dalek killer, who is basically this this ripped action hero guy, Gun Bunny, who is sentenced for murder. He is sentenced to the job of Dalek killer, where they give you a bunch of weapons and teleport you onto a Dalek planet, and you have to fight Daleks and kill Daleks until you die. That was his sentence, and he turned out to be insanely good at it. This was his life calling. He became Absalom Dalek Killer. And that was another backup strip from Doctor Who magazine. But unlike Plutar, who never showed up again, or did he? Dak went on to make it into the novels, and he actually appears on screen in one of the Moffat episodes. An image of him when they're going through a bunch of criminals on a screen, scrolling through a bunch of criminals. Absalom Dak is there among the criminals.
Wow, okay.
So he's now TV level continuity. He was in one of the novels. He's been in lots of the comics. He's gotten his own comic strips from time to time. If you ever thought, I love the Daleks, but I hate all the Doctor's pacifistic little sonic screwdriver, and I want a guy with a big, huge gun who just fights Daleks. Yeah, Absalom Dak is for you. It's like, I don't know, something out of 2000 AD or something. Yes, Steve Moore, inventor of Absalom Dak, wrote this comic. That's back in the 70s. He was doing a lot of the stuff for Doctor Who comics in Marvel. As far as inspirations, to me, this really feels like it's written by somebody who watched Arena in the original series Star Trek. It's got this lone guy running around in this primeval planet being chased by this giant T-Rex looking alien who's much stronger than him and is trying to kill him.
Yeah, except the guy, the circus master, whatever you want to call him. What was his name actually? Sirlac or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, let's see. His name is Silark.
Silark, of course, is a little bit quicker than the Gorn. Or at least he seemed quicker in the comic.
Yes.
He could actually...
I feel like one of the things that, obviously, with you're doing a comic book, your makeup's budget and special effect budget is largely unlimited. And the Doctor Who comics certainly played with that, being able to do things that they never could have afforded on the show, like Gorn monsters that move quickly and spry and are nimble, which we didn't get until the Strange New Worlds. No, wait. The Enterprise had a nimble Gorn. So
That's right.
yes,
And so did Strange New Worlds, of course. But yeah, as you said.
So, So this is. I feel. I don't know this for sure, but it really feels to me like this is written by somebody who watched Arena and said, "Hey, I need a Doctor Who story stat. Okay, how about this?"
I hadn't thought about that, but I kind of agree.
Yeah. I guess, did you want to take a try at reading the summary and finding all my typos?
Junior Time Lord Plutar, my husband, is failed by the Time Academy because of his interventionist tendencies. He ends up repairing TARDISes for the Time Lords, but then an alien circus arrives on Gallifrey. Its ringmaster, Silarg, hypnotizes his Gallifreyan audience and tries to steal a TARDIS. Fortunately, it's the time ship that Plutar is trying to fix, and the malfunctioning TARDIS takes the two of them back to primeval Gallifrey. After a game of cat and mouse, only with Gallifreyan dinosaurs, Plutar brings the TARDIS back to his present day, but Silarg escapes into the past again. But when he tries to pilot the TARDIS to his spaceship, he finds that Plutar and the Watch are waiting for him with guns drawn. Lord Kyrell promises to reconsider Plutar's Time Lord certification.
Thank you. So, Yeah, that's basically it. It's a like 12-page comic.
Yeah, easy read.
Yeah.
It's the quickest study I've done for this show so far.
Yes, yes. Please ignore the presidential cat. He seems to be very noisy right now.
Oh, little guy.
So, this is the first incarnation of the presidential cat, the William Hartnell incarnation. So, and he's old and grumpy.
Oh, little guy.
So, um, but here, maybe if I put him up, put him up there. I think maybe he wants to get up on the tape. Nope, he doesn't. He's jumping right off. All right. I have no idea how to make him happy. I'm
That's
going to
typical
regenerate you
for
into-
a. That's typical for a. What are they called again? The animal with a.
calculating animal with
a
the
tail.
tail. Yes.
He's distracting you while the others are up to no good. I'm sure.
Yes, yes. Anyway, so space-time coordinates. This takes place on the home world of Gallifrey, sometime in the middle history of the Rassilon era. The only real clue we have is it's stated it's been a very long time since aliens have visited the world. And by Time Lord standards, that kind of implies it's been like thousands of years.
Right.
And then they go back in time to the Saurian age of Gallifrey, which is also known as a nickname. Sometimes it's called Gallifrey's Jurassic period. And this is millions of years before Rassilon's birth, but we don't, again, have any precise dates for when this occurs. But millions of years before Rassilon comes along. As we said, let's see, sequels. There were none. They've never revisited Plutar, despite the Doctor's vague implication that there will be more Plutar stories coming in the future at the end of the comic. We never get to see him again.
Or do we?
Or do we? Yes. Yes. Well, that brings us to Plutar, a character who feels a little like what a younger Doctor might have been. So, I mean, I'm
They
not saying
certainly drew him really hot. I wonder what like action Marvel superhero template they like used to do him. He's got a bit of a well, Marvel, that wouldn't be Marvel, but I was gonna say he's got a little bit of a Superman vibe to him.
Yes, to some degree, they chose to do them in red, yellow, and blue when they colorized the comic years later. But so it was originally in black and white. And
Right.
Most famously, one of the first villains to show up in the comic was Beep the Meep, and he was this little white fluff ball who was explicitly described as being white in the text. But when they colorized the comics years later, they made him blue, but left in the line about him being white in the dialogue. You will discover that as we look at other Doctor Who comics, especially these Marvel ones, that they're all tend to have big, strapping, well-muscled guys in tight suits and voluptuous women. So
It's really funny.
Yeah, the Time Lords do not wear robes in this era of Gallifrey. They all wear tight spandex jumpsuits with big collary and collary tunic things over them, but and big boots. But yes, that's he's also got a fairly traditional looking Earth collar on that shirt, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he sure does.
I hadn't noticed that before, but that is I don't think I've seen any shirt on Gallifrey that had that collar before or since then. But I'd have to go back and look. Maybe when the cowboy Gallifreyans show up in Hellbent with Peter Capaldi, they might have had some collars like that. That would be the place to look. Is if you're, yeah. Anyway, so Plutar. What did you think of Plutar? I guess you.
I liked him
married
overall.
so-
I think he was an interesting character. It was neat to see this other layer of sort of the Time Lord hierarchy. You know, if you're not a Time Lord, you get to go live among the Shibogans, or you're in the repair shop. Apparently, there are no clerical or desk jobs on Gallifrey that you can do. So maybe there are
actually lots and lots of desk jobs.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But apparently Plutarch's skills made TARDIS repair make more sense.
Make more sense, exactly. No, I'm teasing. I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked Plutar. I didn't like the, taking into context that it was written in the 70s and like, the comic book format, and of course Marvel probably having like a certain kind of like, thing that trope that they lean on. Perhaps I would have imagined Plutar less aggressive and more witty. But he's a young Gallifreyan. Who knows what kind of, before that first or before those early regenerations, they pack you got a lot of energy, a lot of.
He really sounds like he just wants to get out into the universe and start punching bad guys.
Yeah, it sounds like he just really wants. I mean, he wants to be an interventionist, which is interesting too. I did think it was a little over the top that Lord Kyrell was even talking about non-interference when there's like an alien on your planet interfering with you. So I thought that was kind of funny, but also like, again, showing it's an interesting take on the hierarchy, on the Time Lords themselves, that they're not immovable, or they have this like really fixed vision of things. It's a weird implication. I think they've fixed that since then, but I didn't really particularly like that they seemed stupid, like in a way,
Yeah, well, this is a post Deadly Assassin comic, which came out in 77, 76, the TV episode Deadly Assassin.
Right.
And that was the episode where we learned that, yes, the Time Lords have the power of gods, but they are kind of all old bureaucratic men who are obsessed with books and procedures and ceremonies and don't really have any mental flexibility at all to them.
I see.
And are actually kind of naive about what's going on outside of their bubble. They literally live in a big glass bubble.
They literally do. It's true.
Yes. And at the time, there was actually quite an outcry from fandom who'd been keeping notes about the revelation that the Time Lords were these old kind of semi-senile people who were corrupt and political and scheming or just kind of out to lunch and self-serving and stuff, and that there were people who were very upset because up until that point the Time Lords had at least superficially been portrayed as big noble archons of time and who sat there in long robes and presided over history, which they do. But if you actually get in a room with one, you realize this guy has a lot of book learning. But I'm pretty sure I can fool him with this little shell game. Which one has the seed? Yes. And there were a lot of outcry, but it didn't really make a difference in the long run. The Robert Holmes definition of what a Time Lord society was became the definition going forward. And the Time Lords who were not like that were the rare exceptions going forward, rather than the standard. And so, Lord Kyrell, or whatever, how did I say that name?
I've been saying Kyrell, but
Kyrell.
Is it Kyrell? Let's see. It would be Kyrell, Kirel, Kyrell.
Kyrell.
Like
Lord
Harvey
Kyrell.
Keitel. Lord Keitel, like Lord Harvey Keitel. No, I'm just kidding.
Lord Kyrell. Maybe on the extreme end of that, with this whole, I can't be bothered to figure out what's wrong with my TARDIS, just fix the damn thing.
Such an idiot.
And, it's an alien, we can't interfere with it, even if it's on our planet taking our shit. He might be at the extreme end, but you can imagine that there's a guy like that after you watch Deadly Assassin, that there's got to be some Time Lords like that running around.
It's been a while. I guess I've been hanging out in the New Who, where they're all kind of like, they are still kind of there is still that quality to them. You know, they're slower to come around. The Doctor definitely has to do a lot of proving to get them to see. You know, as we saw in what was it in Day of the Doctor when they when he wants to put Gallifrey in a bubble, so
you do get a touch of that. Part of it is that we're looking at Time Lords who have fought a brutal war.
It's true.
And that's going to change your culture. Basically, all the losers like Kyrell
were probably offed during the war.
Offed or side promoted. They were pushed out of the way. They're no longer in positions of prominence because when you're fighting the Daleks, you cannot afford to have that level of incompetence involved in the decision-making process. Gallifrey would have been wiped out a long time ago, and it certainly wasn't doing that well when we finally see it. And the fact that the High Council, the Inner Council, is up there with Rassilon sticking drums in the Master's head. Well, down in the basement, the War Council is busy trying to stuff Gallifrey into a pocket universe and stuff, and trying and investigate who stole the moment. The whole thing kind of indicates how dysfunctional it kind of is at that point. There's basically
agreed.
Two groups of leadership doing, marshaling their resources without any attempt to coordinate between the two of them. And so, even in that aspect, we're still seeing a sort of dysfunctionality there. So we've got Plutar, who hates the Shibogans, and he hates the Time Lords. He explicitly says to his I don't know, his academic advisor who flunks him or whatever at the beginning, that you can't condemn me to a life with the Shibogans. And especially in this context, originally Shibogan was just the words the people called themselves before they got rebooted into these regenerating things with the looms and all that back during the time of Rassilon and the Intuitive Revolution. And then after that, Shibogan kind of became a term for roughly meaning the unwashed masses, or the, kind of the less civilized, less intelligent. So when Plutar says, you can't condemn me to a life with the Shibogans, he's basically shouting to his academic advisor, you can't condemn me to a life with the unwashed masses.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, that doesn't play well. And then, the next page, he's like, and so Plutar begins his life that he both loves and hates. He loves fixing TARDISes, but he hates the Time Lords. And I'm like, so he hates both the Time Lords and the Shibogans. I mean, is that classist? I don't know if that's classist if you hate all the classes.
I think he hates the Shibogans. It's more like I think he feels like contempt for them, maybe, probably. But I would say that he didn't start hating the Time Lords till he was kind of sidelined, Yeah. But I do see that. It is a funny thing, though. I feel like this comes up a lot, though. You get this, the rebellion of the youth, perhaps, he's rebelling against his society, which is the Time Lord Society in many ways. But he also doesn't want to... He's a weird character because he also doesn't want to be a Shibogan, and I don't think he hates them. I think it's more like he doesn't value the simple life that they probably live. He probably doesn't value that. To him, it's a waste of his education and his talents, and it probably feels unfair that those are your only options on Gallifrey. So that's what I gathered from it. But it's still a little, there's definitely a little classism at play there. I also detected that for sure. And you get that. I mean, they are very snooty, these Time Lords, so you kind of get that impression.
Yeah, no, and I could totally see if he was just anti-Time Lord, but then he's all like, no, you have to make me a Time Lord. I'm like, who is this, Anakin Skywalker?
He's 100%. He's like, that's a good one. That's true.
I hate the Jedi Order, and I hate the Jedi Council, but I want to be a master. Why do you want to be a master?
We've been saying,
you could run off to the lake country and have sex with that Natalie Natalie Portman. What more do you need, boys?
Speaking of masters, is there anything that precludes Plutarch from possibly being the origin story of the master?
I mean, I guess there's the fact we know the master's original name, and it wasn't Plutarch, but it could have. But that's probably in both the case of Plutarch and of the case of Kashi. I think that's how you say it, Kashi.
Was
In
the
both of their
master's name
cases,
Kashi?
yeah, that there were probably big long names, and also names rotate. Like the Doctor was kind of called Theta Sigma the entire time he was in the Academy. So Plutarch might also be some sort of academic name, though he did seem to keep it after getting kicked out of the Academy. So if you wanted a reason to say no, it's not the Master, you could grab onto that. But if you really like the idea that this is a young master, you can make it happen. So
This whole thing, the new show does with the Doctor's name being a secret, is really interesting. And I always thought it would be fun if they called him like Sig Thay or something like that, short for Sigma Theta.
Oh.
Sig Thay.
Well, there was some speculation that Sigma Theta might be his initials, like JT or something.
Right.
Because those are actual Greek letters, but nothing that's really been nailed down there.
His name is Sohail. The Doctor's name is Sohail. No, I'm just
Can't prove you wrong. Nobody can prove you wrong. I guess the current showrunner, Chibnall has till tomorrow to prove you wrong. So yes, Plutarch is I guess I think the thing is that only Time Lords get to leave Gallifrey on a TARDIS. So my assumption is that, like the Doctor, the only reason the Doctor became a Time Lord, and the only reason Plutarch wants, I'm assuming the only reason Plutarch wants to become a Time Lord is because it's the only way to get off Gallifrey and see the universe firsthand. You have
that
to be a
makes
Time
complete
Lord
sense.
to get to ride in a TARDIS in any traditional with any regularity. And so being in a Shibogan means you're never going to be inside a TARDIS other than to fix it. You don't get to take flights in them. And so my assumption is that that's why he's so upset. And that's kind of all I've been able to put together as to why the Doctor even bothered getting his Time Lord certification, is that he was hoping to get off of Gallifrey as well. Because everything else about the Doctor's past says that he wouldn't really give a damn if he didn't graduate. But so again, we're kind of in is Plutarch the Doctor? Is Plutarch the Master? Maybe.
I think more the Doctor still on that one, but
he does talk about fighting evil, but then the Master actually starts out as being a lot more idealistic in the Gallifrey time than he will later be known for.
I think we have to talk about how close Plutarch is to the modern, the ancient philosopher Plutarch.
I do not know enough about Plutarch to comment, but does Plutarch regularly bash both the rich and the poor and threaten to punch people who cause him problems?
Sadly, I don't know enough about him, but I'm going to read about him. I should have read about him before this, but I'll probably read about him after this to find out. But I just remember vaguely from history, he was a philosopher, historian, biographer, and essayist, according to Wikipedia, and priest at the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. He is known primarily for his Parallel Lives, a series of biographies of illustrious Greeks and Romans and Morali, a collection of essays and speeches upon becoming a Roman citizen. He was probably named Lucius Mestrius Plutarchus. So, yeah, interesting. But yeah, I know he's a big deal in philosophy circles.
It is certainly possible that that's where the name came from. And there might be some connections there if you knew about Plutarch's philosophy or ideas, that maybe it would make more sense with decoding Plutar. That would not surprise me.
Right. It could have just simply been, I mean, an homage to Plutarch. Maybe the writer likes Plutarch's work or something. But I like it.
No, that's an intriguing idea that we should have followed up on, and we didn't. So,
But we might follow up on it in the previous podcast. Timey-wimey, wibbly
yes, yeah. Anything's possible in this podcast.
It's true.
We're gonna do this like J. Michael Straczynski and record the final episode a whole season early. So, all right. Well, did you have any other observations about Plutar?
No, I think we gave him a good review there, a good overview on
All
Plutarch.
right. Well, let's talk about our T-Rex headed villain, Scylark. I think that's how you say that.
Scylark, yeah.
Yes. Who in the original one, actually, it's right there up on the screen. It really looks like ends in a G to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
I was, and in fact, put in my notes in the synopsis that Sohel read, I spelled it with a G because that's the page I looked at when I was trying to figure out how to spell it. And but it's Scylark with a C everywhere else in the comic. So I don't know if that's a typo or just a really sloppily drawn C. I'm not really enough into comics to know just what the range is for mistakes on this sort of thing is. But
I feel like in the 70s, comics were probably in one of their like heights. They were probably so ubiquitous that like some of these things got, had to be out so quick that like they didn't do spell checks and things like that necessarily, or like, things could get past stuff.
It's certainly possible. But he's the guy who's trying to steal a TARDIS. And he looks like a dinosaur, especially once they colorize him green. But I mean, look at that face. He was going to look like a dinosaur no matter what color you made him look. And that tail. And he goes to Gallifrey to steal a TARDIS, and he ends up fighting actual Gallifreyan dinos. So I can't help but feel like the writer just had dinos, or at least the artist just had dinos on the mind. Just like, what should I do? Dinosaurs. The answer to all of my questions will be dinosaurs for this one. What should they, what time zone should they go to? Dinosaurs. What will be the complication that will threaten both the hero and the villain? Dinosaurs. But yes, we get to see primeval Gallifrey. We get to see some dinosaurs. So yeah, what did you, I mean, he's pretty two-dimensional, but he's got that cigar. So you gotta love him. He's a T-Rex smoking a cigar. I mean,
I dug him. I was impressed at his ambition of trying to steal a TARDIS. Like, he talks about plundering, different time zones and things like that. I just, again, to me, speaking, of like just from strictly the story perspective, I understand this is a short little, comic, but I just wanted to know more about his motivation.
His motivation was evil.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. It's true. But
that's not enough for you.
No, I guess not.
Are you saying that the comic book villain was a bit comic book villain?
Yeah, I guess I am saying that. I guess that's what I'm saying. But that being said, the design was cool. I dig his design a lot. And I just thought he was a fun overall, villain. It was a little weird that like the whole thing of moving the TARDIS to his ship. Like, I thought that was funny. That he had to, because the dinosaur threw the TARDIS at one point, so he had to move it back. He had to go through a lot of struggle.
Well, he didn't even move it back. He was moving it out
to
where his ship landed.
To where his ship was, right.
Yeah,
right.
Because it was originally, the TARDIS is malfunctioning, and so it turns out it can only go forward and backward in time. It can't move in space.
Right.
So he can't fly it to his spaceship. He has to roll it out across go back in
That's right.
time, roll it across, put logs under it, and roll it over to where where
Right.
his spaceship is parked in the future, and then jump forward in time to where so that it'll be inside his spaceship.
I guess that's the extra bit of the story that I would have liked is clearly he has learned how to fly a TARDIS from a Time Lord or that someone, you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yes,
and that's the part that I was curious about more than anything, which we didn't
Yeah.
really get an answer to.
and the comic does hang a lantern on that by having Plutar. He can't. How does he know how to fly it?
Yeah,
but they never
exactly.
answer that question.
They
They, do
never answer
raise
that
the
question.
the author indicates that yes, I'm aware of this. It's bizarre that this guy knows how to fly a TARDIS, but apparently better than the Hartnell Doctor, and so,
Apparently.
is the implication anyway. Um, and but yeah, they never actually explain it. There are people who sell. There is at some certain points in certain time zones throughout the universe, places where you can buy bootleg TARDISes that are clones of actual TARDISes. So I suppose he could have somehow encountered one of those or a owner's manual for one of those bootlegs. So
Well,
again,
based on what we've seen of the incompetence of the general incompetence of Time Lords of this time, it's also very possible that he just got a manual from one of the Time Lords somehow, or got a hold
Yeah.
of a manual and was able to figure it out. I do think it's interesting also that like later, at least it's implied, I think in the New Who, that the TARDIS has to like you to a degree. At least the Doctor's TARDIS has to like you to let you fly the TARDIS, because River can fly the TARDIS. But it's implied that it's so complicated that only a Time Lord, or like especially doing one, just one Time Lord flying it. But then here we see that Lord Kyrell seems to be the only Time Lord flying that TARDIS. So who it goes back and forth.
the Doctor's TARDIS is a very special custom job, as we will learn. And so a whole lot of stuff that is true for the Doctor's TARDIS is not actually true for other TARDISes.
Okay.
So that is which is kind of like obnoxious, because that's the TARDIS we know the most about, but it isn't very representational.
Of
Like,
all the other TARDISes, yeah.
Time Lords have a genetic code embedded in them that basically unlocks their TARDIS and allows it to travel through the vortex. And the TARDIS has symbiotic circuits that read that code out of the Time Lord as sort of a security measure. So even if you clone a TARDIS, you can't use it because you don't have that security, that genetic code, that symbiotic nuclei. The Doctor, however, you'll see there's lots of episodes where somebody who's not a Time Lord flies the Doctor's TARDIS for.
Well,
somehow
yeah,
or other.
we saw what's his face, the
Adric.
kids. Adric, thank you, yeah, Adric.
Yeah.
But he is an East Space Gallifreyan, so I don't know.
Well, the novels have revealed that the Doctor installed a symbiotic bypass in his TARDIS to make it harder for the Time Lords to track him. I think it was a way to
gotcha.
get around that.
That's right.
That code signature that Susan mentions.
We were talking about, right? Yeah.
in Storm of Angels. And so because of that, anybody who knows the right buttons to push can fly the Doctor's TARDIS.
Right, gotcha.
So this does raise the question: how was Silark? How did the Silark fly the TARDIS back and forth through time? But the novels have also stated that temporal drift, which is what we're seeing when a TARDIS moves in time but not through space, that's called temporal drift. That function can be enabled without using the symbiotic circuits. So he can. So paradoxically, everything we see in the comic works, but even if the TARDIS had been fully functional and not needing repair, he still wouldn't have. He still would have had to do all the stuff we see him do. Because unless he's got some symbiotic nuclei. Now, he has figured out how to breach Gallifreyan defenses. He has figured out how to train himself to fly a TARDIS. It is possible that this guy has acquired some symbiotic nuclei technology somehow or other. He might have been prepared for that, and it just never comes up. In part because the whole idea of symbiotic nuclei wasn't invented until the mid 80s, and this comic was published in the 70s. But so
Interesting.
yeah. Anyway, I guess let's talk a little bit about Lord Kyrell. I think this scene sums him up completely right here, this one frame. Everything you need to know about this guy is right here.
He tosses the key over.
I don't know. It's beneath my dignity to look. You're the machine man. You find out what the problem is. And this is amusing if you know your lore, because there's a gadget built into it every TARDIS called a fault locator, where you just kind of push a couple, switch it on, and it does a diagnostic on every single system in the entire TARDIS and gives you a screen image of everything that's broken. And he can't be bothered to do that.
Lazy Time Lord Keitel. Lord Kyrell, sorry, not Keitel, not Harvey Keitel here. But
it's basically like the phone says, would you like to click here to know, like your phone says, click here to learn what is wrong with your phone. And you're like, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to take it to the Apple shop. It's like, really? You can at least click the button. You know, it could be something easy that's easy to fix. So yes, he becomes more despicably petty and self-centered and lazy when you know the full story.
Right. Absolutely.
I also thought it was interesting that the Time Lords, who are fairly powerful psionicists in their own way, are completely fooled by Silark's hypnotic projector.
I mean, that's the thing that's so interesting to me. Like, Silark, this was definitely a planned hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think I think it's interesting because, like, if you take this story and, like, kind of, like, just add a couple elements, like a little little prep, like, on Silark's part, like, and stuff like that, I think it could be so much more fun. But yeah,
Silark's 11.
Silark's 11. That's exactly where I was thinking. That's funny. Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah, and I mean, I hadn't thought about it till this instant, but a circus freak show type setup is exactly the sort of way that you'd present aliens to Gallifreyans, because they're all so speciesist that they view all the lesser species as almost like weird animals. So
right.
that's a sort of the least threatening way you could drop a bunch of aliens in front of a bunch of xenophobic species is to portray them as carnival freak show things.
Right.
So, I don't know if the writer had thought about it that much, but of all the different distractions you could have come up with that were alien but palatable to Gallifreyans, I suppose that's actually a pretty good one.
Yeah,
it plays right into their psychological blind spots. That let's go look at the goofy aliens. So and they even have that weird mention about and then we will end by recreating this ancient ceremony to this god. I think if you remember that.
Right. That's right.
It feels like that's got to be important to the story somehow, but it never comes up again.
It's true.
Well, what did you think was the good about this story?
I think the good was seeing, a little bit of the. I think the good for me was the Time Lord TARDIS lore, looking at it before it gets developed further. Like the fact that this is from the 70s, it was neat to see the ideas that some of the writers were, kind of coming up with about Time Lords and the Shobogans and all that good stuff, and expanding it in this format. And again, I like I just like that, I liked Plutar's, despite it not making sense, I like his physique and his kind of like his aggressiveness, or the action hero style of him. I actually ended up liking that. I was very surprised. I wasn't expecting to talk about this little 12-pager so much, but yeah, I think to me overall, it is a fun little kind of glimpse into it's a wonderful what if type of adventure, like that kind
I mean,
of thing.
I still consider it canon, but yeah, even though the Gallifreyans are wearing spandex and
right.
and there we have some unanswered questions, but we can imagine what those answers could have been,
Right.
This was as I said, I did actually subscribe to this comic for a short period and up until its end. And so I did read this, and this was absolutely fascinating to me as a little kid back in like 1985 or 86 or something like that when I read this. So I have very fond nostalgia feelings that make it impossible for me to fairly judge this comic. But I was fascinated. Oh, look, at the time when I read it, I was like, oh, we're spending so many pages on primeval Gallifrey. I want to learn about modern Gallifrey
Right.
with all the cities. But now coming at it, I'm like, oh, cool. This is the only comic that shows us primeval Gallifrey.
It's true. It ties in nicely to kind of what we've been talking about too, because it's cool to see that there are dinosaurs or large reptilians
Yeah.
in Gallifrey's past, because it just reminds me of the East Space Adventure with Adric and those Marshmen a little bit. Like it just further kind of solidifies the thesis you've been
You
presenting.
can certainly
yeah.
imagine a Marshman running around in those swamps that we saw, can't you?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Or after, this is it's cool that I like this thesis of piecing together the history of Gallifrey that we're kind of doing with these adventures that we've been reviewing. So it's very exciting from that perspective. Well thought out.
I am trying to approach things from a certain amount of historical level, historical or chronological order, so we can kind of build up the planet and then look at the people and then look at the history and stuff like that.
I hope the audience is having as much fun with these reveals as I am.
Yes, I hope so too. I hope we have an audience.
I think we do.
We do?
Yeah. Hey, if you build it, they will come, right?
Yes. Yes.
Audience, as a matter of fact, we're supposed to talk to the audience, Brian. I don't know if you know this, podcasting 101. But audience, let us know what you think. Leave a comment down below and hit the like button.
Oh, yes. Yes, we are
we're
supposed to
do
always
that.
remind you that. Otherwise, you won't know it's a YouTube podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's on YouTube, but it doesn't sound like a YouTube. Nobody says like or subscribe.
Right.
Let's see. Other things I loved about this story. There's a picture for this one. The first TARDIS on Gallifrey is used to hit a dinosaur in the head. I mean, that's just
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You realize, there it is. That's the first TARDIS on Gallifrey. It's not the first one built on Gallifrey, but because it went back in time, it's the first TARDIS to appear on Gallifrey. And one dinosaur hits another dinosaur in the head with it.
I really dig this shape that they have for a TARDIS that doesn't have its chameleon circuit turning it into...
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting that the chameleon circuit didn't just work, or maybe it did or whatever. Also, it's interesting that they describe the Silak's, not Silak, did I say his name right? Sorry, yeah, Silak. Silak's ship had cloaking fields and all these things. So they had a little bit of technology on that ship that resembled what I imagine the chameleon circuit could do, or other circuits on the TARDIS. But yeah, I thought this was interesting because I think the show has established that the TARDIS is cylindrical, if I'm not mistaken.
well,
so I
the
thought this was
TARDIS
cool.
is-
It's
we-
more like a refrigerator.
Yeah, well, see, this is loosely based off the cubicle TARDISes that show up in War Games.
Okay.
And in War Games-
another adventure I haven't remembered.
Yes.
That I've seen when I
in
was a
War
kid.
Games, they show us some TARDISes and some good bootleg clone TARDISes that look like cubes, and they have the door opens like a drawer on the
Right.
side of it. And that's kind
Right.
of here the entire wall is the drawer. As opposed to the ones in War Games where it's like a drawer is set into the wall that slides out, but it's still the same thing. So it's almost like somebody verbally described or went off their memory from when they saw it when they was a kid, because this would have been 10 years after War Games aired, or 11 years after War Games aired. And so I'm wondering if it was just the artist was going off their memory of what the TARDISes look like, or if they talked to somebody and got a verbal description and then that was what they drew based on the verbal description, because it's very close. But you're right. We see cylindrical TARDISes both in the past when the Doctor steals the TARDIS in Name of the Doctor, and in the future when the Doctor steals the TARDIS in Hellbent, a different TARDIS. They're slightly different cylindrical designs, but they are cylindrical. So yeah, they're both cubes and cylinders, because at the TV level of canon, War Games has explicitly cube shaped TARDISes. But we now have cylinders bracketing them, and they're both default shapes. So quite what's going on there, I don't know. It might just be that there's two different groups designing TARDISes, and one group makes all of their types square cubes, and the other one makes them all cylinders. And
okay.
That was kind of my best headcanon for why it goes back and forth, because you think it would change and then stay changed or something, but I don't know. The other thing I love about this is that Silak says, "By the 7 bellies of Jarak." I just love that. The 7 bellies of Jarak.
Yeah, that Jarak. What is up with that? Right? It's
I just love that line. It's so silly. It's so old style sci-fi comic book. 7 bellies of Jarak. I might try to work that into my regular conversation going forward. Well, let's talk about the bad. I think you clearly were kind of able to come to terms with Plutar's sort of, at least to some degree, Plutar's violent tendencies, but I was like, wow, he looks like he's about to punch his academic advisor, or whoever that is, teacher at the academy, because he's getting flunked. He doesn't, but he pulls back his fist like this and screams about having to be treated like an unwashed mass. And then when he escapes from the TARDIS at the end, and near the end of the comic, and Silarak is still inside the TARDIS, Plutar comes running up to the other Time Lords and says, "Quick, get some soldiers to shoot him." I was just like, I mean, he was trying to kill you, but as far as, is this the Doctor? It's like, wow, this is definitely the most violent Doctor ever, Brigadier, gun down those aliens over there.
Which would have been a neat arc to explain his later more pacifist tendencies. Maybe something happens, but yeah, this guy would have been a better like TARDIS repair. Okay, fine, he loves to fix the TARDISes, but he would have been good on the Gallifreyan Guard as well,
that kind of feels almost like, then he could fight evil on a local level. He wants to fight evil, he's just not fighting evil on other planets. And as a kid, I thought Plutar was great, and maybe he's the Doctor. As an adult reading the comic, I'm kind of like, is this the guy I want using his godlike powers to fight evil?
No. Exactly.
I'm not entirely sure. He's very quick to just shoot those people and threaten to punch people. He doesn't who make academic decisions. He does not like.
He doesn't just threaten to punch him. He actually grabs him by the shirt.
Yeah, he grabs him by the shirt. Yeah.
So it's like, Plutar's Plutar's a little much.
Yeah. Do we want this guy running around with a TARDIS and I hate you, I'm going to go back in time and kill you as a baby? So.
Right. I think the Anakin thing was very apt when you said that.
Yeah. No, it's not quite the same. This guy's a much better actor than Hayden Christensen. Let's see. The other bad was we don't actually learn all that much about Gallifrey besides it had a dino era. I kind of wanted to learn some cool trivia, like exactly how many years back in time they went. And it's a little frustrating how vague a lot of the details are, or the details are just absent. But what did you think? Was there any bad for you?
I mean, I think I'll just say I'll agree with your bads. Those are mine as well. Like, definitely the Plutar character could have been better had he not been as violent. So I agree with that very much. Also, I'll just add, I've said it before, but I just don't like the two-dimensional nature of the Time Lords either. Like, they're just very, that whole idea. I mean, I get it. Like, I get the commentary on them and stuff like that, but to me, I think of Time Lord. I guess my sensibilities are that Time Lords, yes, they would have a degree of that, but they're still very clever and they're like the smartest beings in the, universe, and they're supposed to still have like they're not. I don't know, like it's not one thing. It's like bunch of little things that culminate in it not feeling right to me. But other than, but it's like not like the end of the world. I still
Well,
enjoy
it
the
will
comic.
actually be interesting when we get to the Deadly Assassin to see what you think of it and which side you
Yeah,
land.
I'm
Because
actually curious because I when I was a kid, I remember Deadly Assassin, but not like the details. So I'm gonna be very curious as
yeah,
well.
because there's definitely some other Doctor Who fans I've run into who would prefer the Time Lords to be a bit more godlike, alien, and ethereal, and less petty, selfish, and self-obsessed. So it'll be fun, and it was interesting. The Book of the War goes a long ways to try to square how both of these things can be true at the same time, which
Right.
we will be getting into the Book of the War. So wibbly wobbly stuff. Did you have any wibbly wobblies?
No, because we really didn't do much wibbly wobbly. Well, no. Okay, so I take it back. It was a cool solution that the Time Lord guard traveled back in time, and we're already waiting for. So that was my wibble. That'll be my
Yeah.
wibbly wobbly.
No,
Yeah,
though
for
that
sure.
is actually kind of. You say the Time Lords aren't shown to be smart, but here
That's
at
very
least
clever. Yeah.
Plutar comes
Yeah.
up with an intelligent solution.
Right.
At least
Exactly.
I think the implication is it was his idea,
His idea. Yeah.
but we still do get in the end, Plutar doesn't win by punching the alien in the face, despite the fact that that's how he wants to win. He
Right.
doesn't actually. That's not what
Well,
wins
and
the day.
I have to give credit to that as well. I think that's like an interesting thing, and it's definitely there in the. Sorry, I keep moving around so much on today's podcast. I don't know what's going on with Starfleet Boy. His TARDIS keeps reconfiguring here, but yeah. But I would say that like he is this kind of like character that has that aggressiveness or whatever, that the this like shoot first attitude, but he clearly isn't a match for the Gorn guy. Like there's so many times where like when it comes to brute force, that he was gonna lose if he was just lucky that he escaped. But
Yeah.
then he uses this clever timey-wimey thing and actually uses his brain and he wins. So like I
Yes.
like that about it. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it is in the end a Doctor Who story.
Right, exactly.
Despite the fact that it's, kind of playing around with some superhero tropes a bit, or at least
Right.
comic book tropes. It does in the end land pretty solidly on intellect trumps muscles. Let's see. What did I thought? I thought it was a little weird that the Gallifreyans are the Gallifreyans are very naive, but they're also very xenophobic. So this guy manages to bypass all of Gallifrey's security systems and get down there. And the xenophobic Time Lords are just like, oh, this guy bypassed all our security systems. Oh, well, let's watch his circus. It felt a little off. And some of that is just that the nature of Gallifreyans hadn't been as well nailed down at this point as they would later be in later stories. That in they're just the TV show hadn't finished fleshing them out yet. We see once again that security is terrible in TARDIS repair bays, which is why the Doctor stole the Type 40 from a repair bay instead of the normal place that people park their TARDIS, because the normal dry docks are actually pretty have some security, but apparently there's no security in the repair bays. And so that's consistent with what we know. That once he's on the planet, he has no trouble sneaking in there and grabbing a TARDIS. Apparently, Plutar doesn't know how to double lock the doors, which is a setting that you can that the Doctor has used on a few occasions to prevent the TARDIS key from opening them. But
That's right.
yeah, Solark has the key, and he's like, "Ah, oh, he's coming, and he's got the key. I can't lock him out." I was like, "Well, and maybe this model of TARDIS doesn't have a double lock setting.
Or he just, he never became a Time Lord, so he didn't learn all the secrets. Maybe there's stuff
Yeah,
that even.
yeah. He just
I don't know.
maybe and he could be panicking. People make really stupid decisions when you fill their brain with adrenaline.
Yeah, it's
that
true.
that is something that everyone's like, well, why didn't they do this in this action Hollywood movie? And I'm like, well, realistically, when you pour that much adrenaline in your brain, you're probably going to make some really stupid choices.
Right.
Very few people, unless you're one of those trained people who've actually been in really crisis situations multiple times, and you can train your brain to handle the adrenaline. But the only way you learn that is by experience. So, but well, is there anything else we want to say about the story before we talk about some of the Time Lord of the Time Lords?
No, let's get to it.
Okay. I thought this would be a good chance to talk about the world of Gallifrey a bit. So there she is with Earth for scale. Earth doesn't normally orbit Gallifrey, but in this picture, it is.
Is
there.
this from Doctor Who?
Yes, this is from the End of Time.
End of Time. That's right. Yeah.
Yep. So you can see exactly how big it is and how weird it is that the planet has the exact same gravity as Earth. But
It is pretty weird. And it glows? Like, is that just from the Time War? The planet's on fire, or what was that?
I'm not sure if that's supposed to be the glow of the transduction barriers or if that's supposed to be some sort of Time War thing, like technology on the surface of the planet, like shield generators or
Gotcha.
something, or cities. Though the planet, because the population of the planet goes way up during the Time War, insanely. They turn all their breeding machines on high speed when the war starts.
You need all that cannon fodder, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few million Gallifreyans on Gallifrey before the Time War. And then by the time the Doctor's blowing it up, there's like billions of children, like tens of billions of children. So, we went up by a factor of like 10,000.
Right.
At least. So Gallifrey is the third planet from its primary star. It's known as the Shining World, or the Jewel of the Seven Star Systems, or Seven Systems.
So would that be what we call the Seven Sisters, like in the night sky? Is that where it is? Like,
it's in the constellation of Sagittarius, if you're looking at it from Earth.
Oh, okay.
Which is to say, the center of the galaxy.
So Christaberus is what we call Sagittarius?
I mean, I guess, or at least that Castabras is in Sagittarius, because it's so far away. It's probably a little tiny constellation that you can't really see from Earth. But yeah, apparently there are 7 systems in the Castabras constellation. As we can see, its diameter is about 3 times that of Earth, but its gravity, orbital radius, pressure, temperature, and oxygen levels are all about the same as Earth. There's relatively little water and no argon in the atmosphere if you compare it to Earth. So there's a closer up picture of it. This was for a long time the only picture we had of Gallifrey. This is the only image we see in the entire classic series of the planet from orbit. And this picture was no doubt what they were looking at when they made that other picture that we get in Last of the Time Lords. So, but yes, it was always a little frustrating to me that we just get this tiny little, don't even get to see the whole globe for so long. Due to the transduction barrier, the big quantum force field and other layers of defenses that wrap around Gallifrey, the sky appears to be burnt orange at night and pearlescent orange during the day. And there are violet and gray dust clouds and hovering flocks of air diamonds that can be found in the uppermost levels of the atmosphere. And in addition, the sky is often filled with purple, green, and yellow lights, which I think are created by the time ships leaving coming and going out of through the transduction barrier, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. So,
for a planet that it's such a weird planet for it to have, you can tell that there's probably so much that the Time Lord Society has augmented over the years. Like Gallifrey may have started out as a very simple planet, but it has all these different additions that, like these upgrades, if you will, that the Time Lords may have put into it is what where my imagination goes anyway.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, the Time Lords, especially the early Time Lords, hold on a second. The early Time Lords were literally stellar engineers. They engineered stars.
Right. Good point.
The reason Gallifrey has 2 stars is because they built a second one. That's why it has 2 stars.
That's pretty awesome.
That little one there, you see the 2 stars. The little one there, they Omega built.
You're absolutely right. I forgot about that. They can move stars. They can move whole systems, as we've seen also, and like things like that. They are pretty extraordinary. They're like a Kardashev, like, that Kardashev scale. They're like up there, right? They're like pretty much masters of the universe, if you will.
Yes, if they wanted to be. I mean, they are. We'll see when we get to the discussions on the Eye of Harmony and the Web of Time. They are holding all of history in place. So, Gallifrey has 2 moons. You can see one of them in that picture. Though most of Gallifreyans never venture outside, the Gallifreyans do make extensive use of weather control. Despite this, the planet has been suffering for an ice age that starts right around the time Rassilon comes to power and lasts up until about shortly before the Time War begins. There's some indication that the Ice Age might actually be a magical curse. By
the Sisterhood?
Yes, by the Sisterhood.
Interesting.
So at least that's what if you ask the Sisterhood, that's what they'll say. Yeah, we cursed that place. That's why they're stuck in an ice age.
We cast upon thee menfolk.
And the interesting thing is, they say they cursed it until the end of its days.
Oh, fascinating.
And then the Ice Age, another novel had the Ice Age ending not too many years before the Time War started.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So it actually, I don't think it was planned that way, but it actually kind of worked out. Of course, then Gallifrey comes back in the 12th Doctor era, so that kind of short circuits it, but it doesn't last very long. Then the Master gets rid of it. Depending on which season, Gallifrey can appear from space to be the color of rust or a brown and green snow-capped planet. Officially, Gallifrey has been stated to have 24 seasons, but it's also been stated that it's pretty much the dryness of Earth's Serengeti throughout and atmosphere and temperatures of Earth's Serengeti for a lot of the year. So in most places on the planet, it's the sun is intense enough. The suns, plural, I guess that should read, is intense enough to cause sunburn on a human or a Gallifreyan. Despite the fact that Gallifrey has been primed to resist the effects of entropy. And I don't really know what that means, but it sounds exactly like what you were talking about, Sohail. That they primed their planet so that it would not age too quickly.
Right.
Through manipulation of timey-wimey stuff. It still is very old and looks very old. There aren't a bunch of new, jagged, sharp mountains and sharp lava flows and stuff. Everything's worn down. There are lots of Grand Canyon-y type things and other geological formations that take millions of years to form. Most of Gallifrey is covered in burnt red rocky desert with orange sand and near endless mountain ranges. There are brown and purple and gold are other common rock colors. There are green forests and golden fields strewn with rubble, but those make up a minority of the terrain. But you can see there's a picture of some of that green and this there and some of the purple-looking rock. Even with the Ice Age, Gallifrey's ice caps are still overall quite tiny just due to the lack of water. There are 3 small oceans, which apparently were much larger millions of years ago, and several seas, but less than half of its surface is covered in water. And the lakes and seas tend to be golden brown color because of their reflecting light from the burnt orange sky. And apparently the streams often taste slightly sweet.
Sounds lovely, actually.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some upsides to it. But most of the riverbeds are dry. Something happened to all of Gallifrey's water. I don't know if it just slowly evaporated off of the planet or what, but there's clearly was way more water on the planet at one point than there is now. It's definitely much, much drier. And I don't know if there's ever been anything that explicitly said where all the water went. But multiple data points talk about how it used to have a lot more water than it does now. And it's not apparently tied up, at least not entirely, in the ice caps. So, because apparently those aren't very big either. The most famous continent is, of course, the continent of Wild Endeavor, the only continent that gets a name, which appears to be mostly in the northern region and extend all the way up to the Arctic region. But also...
Was it... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but was it named Wild Endeavor before the David Tennant episode?
No. That was the first place we got to hear that. So.
Sorry, carry on, Brian.
No, that was Russell T Davies bringing us some new continuity, which made me oh so happy.
Indeed.
And just the fact that they have a continent named Wild Endeavor indicates that one time the Gallifreyans were a lot less stodgy than they later became.
Indeed.
Because I'm pretty sure Rassilon didn't name anything Wild Endeavor. Rassilon loved endeavors, but none of them were billed as being wild. But it does also extend into it has to extend into the southern hemisphere too, because we have references to the continent that the capital is on also existing south of the equator. So it's continent that seems to reach all the way from the North Pole all the way down into the southern area, at least a little into the southern areas, but is usually described as being a northern continent. So I'd assume that the majority of the mass is in the northern hemisphere. There are some jungles on the continent, and the underdeveloped areas of the Wild Endeavor are known as the Wildlands. So, let's see. We've got another picture here, a little more forest, some trees, and some of the red grass that was mentioned by Russell T Davies.
Right.
I think the Master and the Doctor talked about it at some point. And Southern Gallifrey, which this picture is a picture from Southern Gallifrey.
What is this from, Brian?
This is actually from... the Five Doctors. That's the Death Zone.
Oh yeah,
which has been described as being in Southern Gallifrey. Mm-hmm. Southern Gallifrey is considered wild and beautiful by the Gallifreyans, and appears to be something of a vacation area. And I'm like, well, wouldn't the far south be really cold? But I'm now thinking, well, if Gallifrey's habitable continents are mostly located in the northern hemisphere, then Southern Gallifrey could refer to territories that are actually around the weak equator. It's just south of where everything else is. Just like, we in the US, we say, oh, well, he went down to the south. It's still in the northern equator, but it's still north of the equator. So the Southern Gallifrey could actually be, right around on the equator, which might make it a lot warmer and more temperate and enjoyable if you do like doing stuff outside, which most Gallifreyans don't. Southern Gallifrey is filled with arid plains, which experience warm nights where the stars can shine brilliantly. There are occasional blizzards in Southern Gallifrey. The mountains of Southern Gallifrey are located thousands of miles from the capital and are known to be inhabited by stray cats and hermits. There's a large desert near these mountains. This might be the Comatian Desert that is mentioned in other sources, but that could be a desert that's not in Southern Gallifrey. It's hard to say. Biosphere, 600 million years before the Eye of Harmony. So a little around 3 billion BC, Humanian dating, life from the original ancestor cell arrived on Gallifrey and began to evolve. It was driven by the untempered schism and by the Zeiton ore in the rocks, and these both of those drove evolution quickly, creating new life forms that moved quickly up the evolutionary ladder. And that's all true, even if you don't buy into my Alzarius theory. Though they claim that the planet's ecosystem hasn't been damaged by Gallifreyan people, in actual fact, over millions of years since the installation of the Eye of Harmony, very little of Gallifrey's original biosphere survives, and some of the surviving species, like flater shrews, are in danger of dying out. Well, the outer ecology has been devastated, primarily probably just by the loss of water and the temperature drop. The Time Lords have used the Time Scoop to collect all the extinct species from its past and place them into zoos in their cities.
Look
and
at
for this
that.
reason, they can claim no animal has ever gone extinct on Gallifrey. Yes, none of them can survive most of them can't survive on the wilderness anymore because the ecology of the planet ecosystem is totally destroyed, or at least massively changed and dehydrated. But no, every little critter you've got in a zoo someplace, so technically they're not extinct.
That's outrageous, Time Lords. That's outrageous.
Good job, Time Lords.
Oh no.
And that is sort of the classic Time Lord solution to problems. It fulfills all the bureaucratic requirements, but totally misses the heart and soul of the point. And these might be the Time Lords that Sohail does not approve of. But
Yes,
I mean, it is in fact a pretty par for the course in my experience of the Time Lords that they would just say, all right, well, we'll just build some zoos and time scoop them all, and then then they'll be alive, and then we won't have to deal with these protesters anymore. We know the names of lots and lots of Gallifreyan plants. We don't really know much more than the names in most cases. There's a lot of novels and audios that will name drop a plant here and there. A few of the ones I've picked out, the leaves on the plants can be found with colors of red, green, blue, bronze, silver, and sometimes transparent leaves. And you're probably asking, why would you need transparent leaves? How do you photosynthesize with that? I'm not sure. But the radiation level is higher on Gallifrey. And the UV content is pretty high, primarily because they installed an anti-vampire system known as the Second Sun. The star of Pogar was engineered to make it unpleasant for vampires on the planet. So it could be that the plants have evolved. Some of the plants have said, to evolve in silver, where they actually reflect most of the radiation, and others are transparent so that most of it passes through them, and there's still enough energy to keep them going. There are Caden wood trees, which we know have silver leaves, Ulander trees, which also have silver leaves and produce tasty fruits, Cerob trees, which produce truffle-flavored nuts that are hallucinogenic, that induce hallucinations.
Fascinating.
There are lots of flowering plants. Sarlane, a yellow flower that resembles a Terran daisy, daffodil or rose, which is kind of a little vague that it can look like a flower that looks like we need to get your computer program to make a daisy daffodil rose thing. And
oh yeah,
and
I'll
see
get
what
it to do that. Yes, it's a good idea.
Yeah. There are moonlight blooms, which is what we see here on the screen, which have silver petals, and these flowers are considered a symbol of peace and meditation on Gallifrey.
Oh, they are beautiful. It's a really good picture. What is this from?
I'm trying to remember now. Something that had artwork, obviously, but not a comic book. Possibly an audio drama. Yes.
Brian has forgotten more Doctor Who than many of us will watch in our lives.
Not to brag, but that's probably true. But the emphasis should be on the word "forgot."
It implies you knew it once, and that's okay with me.
Yeah. So yes, here's a moonlight bloom, which presumably blooms at night under the moons, and has silver petals, which go with silver leaves, presumably. There's a Gallifreyan flower of remembrance, which I think you have a picture of that. The Gallifreyan flower of remembrance of the lost dead, known also as Memento Mori, with its yellow petals. And this flower is used to decorate at funerals pretty exclusively because it's the funeral flower.
The Memento Mori is the name of a Star Trek Strange New World episode. Interesting.
Ah, all right. Does it involve yellow flowers at funerals?
No, it's a Gorn episode, if I'm not mistaken. But so that does tie in weirdly with this episode,
Yeah.
but not the same way.
Yes. There are shellneck blossoms, which are golden green and have a very strong smell. And there are Archetor?
I think it's
Arc,
yeah. I think you got it right. Archeator or something. I'm going to say Archeator. Yeah.
which is a pearl gray Gallifreyan rose. So imagine a rose that is kind of a pearlish gray. And Archeator is kind of interesting because that's kind of a Gallifreyan rose. It is also the original name for Susan Foreman, which then ends up like, so, resonates a bit when Eccleston runs off with an earth rose.
Right. Right.
So there's some roses there. Some flowers look like candle flames when glowing in the dark, and some flowers are as tall as trees. On Mount Caden is a mountain so tall it extends outside the atmosphere of the planet, and really should be visible. I was disappointed that we couldn't see it on any of those pictures of the planet that we got to see in Last of the Time Lords. End of Time. There are small blue flowers with long stamens that eat lizards.
A mountain that naturally grew so tall that it extends out of the atmosphere is a fascinating idea, because I think it's possible.
Yeah, I don't think there's any particular reason why a volcano couldn't just keep going and going and going until it exited out of the atmosphere. Obviously, there's a certain crustal issue that as you pile more and more weight, it's going to sort of spread out a bit and make it harder and harder to keep gaining altitude as more and more of the ground just pushes out under it, from the sheer mass of mass of the thing.
Two plates that like shift certain, there's so many ways
the
it
plate,
could do.
that's where you get those volcanoes, is when plates run into each other. So,
but it is fascinating because you could be a spacefaring race without rocketry. You just climb this mountain in a spacesuit, and then you just go off into, I don't know, it's just so weird.
Yeah, no, it is.
Or drive a vehicle up the mountain, if it's such a mountain that you could do that, and then just the vehicle converts to a spaceship, without that's an interesting concept.
And you could build a launch facility up in that area that wouldn't have to fight through all the atmosphere to get up into space.
It's a naturally occurring space elevator or orbital lift, if you will.
Yeah. No, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that almost certainly happened during Gallifrey's early space age, that they probably would have made use of that mountain. That's a really good catch. I hadn't thought about that, but now I want to write. I want somebody to write a story about the Gallifreyan space program. It'll be like for all mankind, only everyone has multiple hearts. So.
You can only find these hot takes on this podcast, folks.
You might be the first person to ever suggest using Mount Caden as a launch platform. You might very well be. I've never heard that idea in anything else.
Wow.
And most people don't even know that Mount Caden is a thing. So we are going to actually talk more about Mount Caden in a future episode, but there are Trump berries, which those were invented before a certain guy became president.
Is that these things? Are these the Trump berries?
I don't know. They're shown in a comic. In a comic book, they go to Gallifrey and they're walking around, and there were these odd-looking plants. And I said, "Well, I'm grabbing a picture of that." But they never mentioned the plants or talk about what they are. They could be Trump berries. They're orange, aren't they? That's right, right. There are lush berries, which are probably edible because Gallifreyans will sometimes go outside and pick them, and I don't know why you'd pick poisonous berries.
Right, this is true.
They never actually say you can eat them, but molten rushes, which have zinc hawthorns. And there's grass that comes in purple and red. I think we saw a picture of the red grass earlier. Biotrophic fungi include feather gills, hog squats, skull caps, and cardinal's collars. So presumably cardinal's collars look a little bit like those Time Lord collars that we see.
I see.
And of course, they always wear skull caps with them. So, other plants include ferns, Hephaesy moss, onions, grockle root, a plant that can be eaten and also be used to make alcohol.
Grockle beer or something like
Yes,
that.
grockle beer.
Or grockle
Ale.
ale, yeah, that's interesting.
Something
That's
like
cool.
that. Moonshine. Swamp mint, which is used as a flavoring. And Nitville, a rather slimy plant that apparently has various medicinal qualities. So, yeah, some plants. There are some others, but they're like we know nothing about them other than the name. And this, I figured I don't just want to sit here and read a list of names, but it's, there's the fauna of Gallifrey, which here you can see some various animals, which you put together in a nice jumbo slide. Thank you. So
Well, you had a little A, B, and C, so I figured you wanted them all on the same slide.
no,
That's
that
how
works.
I understood it. So
Oh,
it's
no,
cool, yeah.
it was more of that I added them later and didn't want to renumber everything.
Oh, I see.
So, among animals that are now only found in zoos are the great lizards, the T-Rex-like Gargantosaurs from the comics. You see two Gargantosaurs there fighting. And a 20-meter long reptile that resembles a Brontosaurus with thick chitinous scales and serrated teeth. These might be the Dinosauria species that is mentioned in one of the novels, but we don't know that for sure if those two things connect or if Dinosauria refers to some other great thing. Being that Doctor Who, Doctor Who is pretty explicit that the dinosaurs are lizards, which has since proven to be wrong, but that was the belief back in the 70s and 60s.
Right. And there's no reason why Gallifreyan dinosaurs couldn't be
Lizards.
lizards. Yeah.
Yes. So maybe they're just lizards.
Yeah.
There's apparently a massive beast with 2 legs, 2 vestigial wings, and purple and white feathers, and oddly 4 eyes, which is interesting because almost everything we've seen on Gallifrey has 2 eyes. And we don't know the name for that, but it showed up in a Doctor Who story once where somebody pulled one out of time and had it cause some problems. And nobody gave its name. Invertebrates include beatude flies, which are fly-like things with golden wing nocturnal instincts with bellies full of helium that are attracted to bright light.
Ooh, I like that.
They have butterflies, bees, gullet grubs, whatever those are, blossom thieves, scrubblers, never such beetles, which that's such a Gallifreyan name for a
Never
critter.
such beetles. Yeah.
Yes. Sand beetles, wasp beetles, dust worms, scissor bugs, snails, and water sligs. Again, mostly all we know is the names, so that's all I have to give you. The most noteworthy insect is definitely the flutterwing, which is 3 meters by 25 meters.
Quite a wingspan there.
Yes. And they never land. There are 5 races of flutterwing, the wild endeavor, the mandrigal, the silver band, and the blue crystal, and the perdition. And Romana took a class in flutterwings biology at the academy, and that's how we first got our first mention of them. Presumably, like the silver band is probably silver, has a silver band on it, and the blue crystal is probably sparkly and blue, but it's kind of hard to guess on some of these what they exactly they are, but they're big insects. They're just vast, and they mate and grow and everything in the air and never actually land on the surface of the planet.
That's an interesting life cycle.
Yes. So we do know a little bit about them. Marine life include the singing yaddlefish, which I believe is a thing about a Doctor Who fan named Yardley or something like that exists. It was very prolific in the forums, and I've heard very mixed reviews of, mostly negative, but apparently somebody stuck him in a novel or something someplace, the singing Yaddlefish. At least that's my assumption, because there's this other famous Yaddle in Doctor Who culture.
Don't tell me that Yaddle in Star Wars is named after this person too.
I can't imagine that. And these fish do sing, and they can be eaten and are tasty. There are kitten sharks, which I assume a kitten shark grows up to be a cat shark, but that's just my guess. There are axolotl salamanders. So, and as far as snakes go, we have the 10-meter long taipan, which is venomous.
Oh, I think I know that word. Sorry, it's axolotl. Sorry, I was so slow on that. It's
okay.
Axolotl.
Not as slow as I was, who didn't know the word.
I don't know where I've seen that before. I'm gonna look it up while you keep going.
And there's venal snakes and bat snakes. Bat snake.
Oh, now I remember. The axolotl is such a fascinating little animal. It's a sea animal, and it looks like it has a stupid smiley face when you see it. Should I pop one up on screen?
Oh, if you can, by all means.
You got to see this
I thought
thing.
about putting some of the critters that are supposed to look very much like Earth critters in the slideshow, but
I can see like a Gallifreyan axolotl might actually be really cute and kind of cool looking. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Let's get this axolotl up. Oops. Hold on. It didn't work. 1 second.
they're slippery. I got a slime coat. They're hard to get a grip on.
There we go. Wait till you see this thing. Let's see. Share screen and get that. Let's see here. Will it let me do this? Oh yeah. Sorry. Carry on, Brian. It's not
All right. Well, let's talk about mammals, or things that are more or less like mammals. They have fur and stuff. Plung balls, which are about the size of your thumbnail, and they live in the mountains and will attach in mass to warm objects. So they're basically thumbnail-sized tribbles. You know, that will totally coat you up and down, like some sort of seed pods. Only they're actual living fur ball creatures hanging on to you because you're warm, and they like the warms. Taffel shrews, which are edible, but are generally only eaten by people who are desperately hungry. Rodent-like things, shrew. Flater shrews, which are bat-like, and they eat mushrooms.
The German word for a bat is Die Fledermaus, so that's cool.
Okay, well, there we go. Cobble mice, which will often be found in buildings and stuff, and those can sprout wings. Cobble mice can fly. Rovy mice, which live in fields and actually will live a very long time if you keep them in a environment with no predators. So,
right.
And are sometimes kept as pets. Moss rats. And if you're saying, I'm noticing there's a few little take two different things and bolt them together to make the name plung ball, taffel shrew, flater shrew, cobble mice, rovy mice. Yes, that's kind of it's a standard sci-fi trope, and it's one that the people who've created Gallifreyan animals have really leaned into. So there's the Vex. There's a different thing, a burrowing animal. Moss rats, a Gallifreyan womp rat, not to be confused with a Tatooinean womp rat. However, they are about 1 meter long. They have 15 legs, which is interesting given that most things on Gallifrey seem to be, follow the same 4-limb pattern that creatures on Earth do. There are pig rats. There are rabbits. There are flubbles, which are 6-legged koalas. There are Selak, which are apparently tasty. bare ass. And at this point, you can tell that people are just having fun with this silly trope of sticking two different things together to make a Gallifreyan animal. And somebody decided to have a donkey from the dry lands called a bare ass. So, yeah, there are horse cats. Again, I feel like at this point, people are just taking the piss. But it showed up in a licensed Doctor Who story, so...
That's really funny.
They do have elephants on Gallifrey. They have pig bears.
Yes,
so-
we saw one of those pig bears.
Yes. Yeah, bring up the picture of the pig bears.
Well, before that, we finally got our... Hold on.
Right.
Our Gallifreyan axolotl.
Oh,
there
yes.
we go. That's an axolotl.
All right.
All right. There's your pig bear.
There's your pig bears. Yes. Sadly, we have more pictures of prehistoric Gallifreyan animals than we do of modern Gallifreyan animals. But there are your pig bears.
Well, because there are no extinct animals, there are no modern animals because no animal went extinct to make way for modern animals.
I suppose so, but it's kind of cheating when they go extinct and you just go back in time and snag something.
It's true.
And pig bears can be trained to be pets and apparently can suffer from swine fever.
Oh.
There are some wolf-like creatures with very long snouts and black and white striped fur, and they're about the size of an adult human. There are Broekir. There are Banjaks. Banjaks. Arboreal browsers that eat the cerob nuts. And the cerob nuts are, of course, the hallucinogenic ones from the cerob tree. So they're often high as... Banjaks are kind of synonymous with being high as a kite in Gallifreyan culture.
Now I imagine them as these kind of Cheshire cat type creatures or Cheshire type, the Barrajaks being like these smiley weird creatures.
Yeah. No, could be. I don't think... It's another one we don't have a picture for. We have a Gallifreyan Marlot, which is... apparently a creature that is purple and unique in all of space and time. So I don't quite know why wouldn't most animals be unique in space and time, but I don't know. They made a bit of a big deal about this in one story. Cats. They have cats, which are revealed as the symbol of intelligence. So we have the moonlight blooms that are the symbol of peace and meditation. We have the flower of remembrance, which is the symbol of remembrance. We have cats that are the symbol of intelligence. We have owls that are the symbol of wisdom. We have bats that are the symbol of evil. And I suppose you could try saying skulls, which are the symbol of paradox, but that was kind of tacked on, and a skull really isn't an animal in of itself. So not part of one. But anyway, cats are in ancient times. It used to be traditional for every single Lord President to have a cat. The Ginseng sector of Gallifrey covers some of the southern mountains near House Ixion, which is the chapter house that is farthest south. And in that area of the Ginseng sector, you can find the so-called killer cats of Ginseng living. These cat people have precognitive powers and despise the tradition of their Time Lords and have their own culture. This all dates from...
That's new to me.
There was a story that was supposed to be the season finale called something akin to the Killer Cats of Ginseng, and the guy who turned in the script produced a script that would take like a $10 million budget to produce, and there was absolutely no way they were going to be able to film this. And about these cat people on Gallifrey capturing Gallifreyans and putting them in gladiator pits. And so the showrunner and basically the showrunners, the script editor and producer, went home for the weekend and pounded out the Invasion of Time over the weekend as a replacement script that they could then go film. But however, the Killer Cats of Ginseng have been immortalized by various other media, occasionally referencing these cat people who live on Gallifrey, even though the episode was never filmed. And
That's
in
funny.
fact, appears like the script has probably been lost. So no one actually, I think, knows what the original title was, and nobody knows what the original plot was, though somebody found some production art of some
Oh,
of the
that's
cat
cool.
people. So
Oh,
anyway,
wow.
so there's the flora and fauna and the nuts, the rocks and dust of the planet Gallifrey.
That was a very nice feature. I enjoyed that very much. Very cool.
Okay. I figured we should do the rock first, and then we'll talk about all the stuff that lives on the rock. So, are we ready for the TARDIS feature of the week?
We sure are.
Okay. Did you want to read it?
Yeah, I'll totally read it.
Okay.
So we're talking about temporal drift and temporal drift in alternate time.
Yeah, actually, we can skip the alternate time part. Sorry.
Okay. Got it. The
Yeah.
relative drift compensators try to keep the TARDIS position in both space and time stable by protecting it against time eddies, random molecular disturbances, and other fluctuations. While in hover mode, a TARDIS can be set for temporal drift by set for temporal drift by disabling the relative drift compensators and engaging the metastasis freeze main switch.
And that,
This will go
that
ahead.
big red switch that you see there on the screen is the metastasis switch. So,
This will cause a TARDIS to move forward in time at a rate of 50 years a second. Though a TARDIS is not fully rematerialized in normal space, the scanner can still be used to observe the effects of the passage of time outside the vessel. The TARDIS can be configured to stop when a specific emission is detected, say the appearance of radio transmissions. This system can even be used to temporarily examine the alternate time possibilities by jumping a time track. While in alternate time, the yearometer will stuck in safety mode, reading all zeros. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Will be stuck in safety mode,
yes.
rather. I should
Sorry.
say, yeah.
Yes. Again, I wrote this, so any of the bad typos are all mine, not Sohail's.
Well, sometimes the reader could fix it on the fly, but sometimes this reader doesn't catch it.
Yes. And that's my fault, not yours.
The main door can be opened, but if the crew leave the time ship, they will discover that their reality quotient too low. They will discover
too
their
low.
reality quotient is too low to have any effect on events in the time zone. They will be ignored by all life forms they encounter and indeed be able to pass through some objects. The reality quotients of the crew will remain low until they have alternate time or until the TARDIS automatically corrects the wandering by moving a crystalline component back into place. At that point, the crew will all snap back in time to the point where the TARDIS properly materialized before the journey into alternate time began. That's really cool. A TARDIS can use its temporal drift function without a Time Lord being on board. However, it will only be able to travel 1,382 years back in time before beginning to lose structural integrity.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we already talked about that last sentence there, but
Yeah.
so we have to assume, given what was stated in the one of the audios, I believe, about the 1,382 year limit, that since either Silac had his own symbiotic nuclei somehow, or he only when he traveled back in time to move the TARDIS with the logs, he traveled back less than 1,000 years, because he could go all the way back millions of years as long as he has Plutar on board, but it's not going to work. The TARDIS will be destroyed if it goes temporal drifts too far without a Time Lord.
A Time Lord.
So,
and then finally, actual space-time jump in the TARDIS.
Oh yeah, you can skip that. That was
that's
we
right.
already
That's
talked
right.
about.
That's right.
It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a note to talk about. We talked about how the symbiotic nuclei is needed to get a TARDIS to fully operate. Anyway, so that's the temporal drift function, which appears to be what we're seeing here, in that the TARDIS only moves through time and not through space. I think the first time we see that is the William Hartnell episode, The Ark. So
And it might be a little bit of a nod to the H.G. Wells Time Machine that kind of shows, right?
yes,
yeah,
that is
okay.
very much exactly how the H.G. Wells Time Machine works. It is like a temporal drift,
Right.
And so yeah, I think most people, as they expanded upon it in the lore in various novels and stories and stuff, were tapping into H.G. Wells and how their machine worked. So. Well, is there anything else we need to hit before we move on out? Because I think this episode's gotten plenty long.
Yeah, I'm impressed that we talked about a 12-page comic book for nearly 2 hours, but the time flew. I was having fun talking about all this stuff.
Yes. Well,
There's
it is.
so much to talk about on Doctor Who, though. It's true.
Yeah. Well, to me, I did think about maybe I should move some of the planet stuff to another episode, but I was having trouble finding anything else that deals with the planet Gallifrey in such a visceral way as this comic does. So finally decided we'll just make this one a long episode. So, but yes, for those of you who want even more, want to hear the names of all those other plants and animals I skipped over, then you can check out allthingstimelord.com, which is my website and repository of knowledge for so much of the information that comes that is talked about in this website. All in one place, you can have full Matrix access rights. And Sohail, I believe you have some products out there that people might enjoy taking a look at.
Yeah, well, there's this podcast I love. I love what we're doing here, but you can also go and check me out on Starfleet Boy, which is my Star Trek dedicated podcast. It's also on YouTube, so just search for Starfleet Boy, and I'm most active on Twitter and on YouTube. So check it out, but definitely please continue to follow this podcast. I think we're gonna have some pretty exciting things ahead and behind us, as you saw in our The Power of the Doctor review last week. So we'll be giving you lots more good stuff ahead.
Yes. Well, can we see if the time scanner can figure out what's coming next?
Yes.
All right. Peering into the wibbly wobbliness, it's got to go twice as far as it normally goes. We are going to be looking at the longest story in the world. No, it's not it is a short story, in fact, titled the longest somewhat
story.
deceptively titled The Longest Story in the World. I could see the look of horror on Sohail's face. He was like, "Oh my God, what am I going to have to do here?"
I'm gonna have to invent steal a TARDIS. I think I'm gonna have to steal a TARDIS. Go
Yes,
back.
steal a TARDIS, you say? I think I see some TARDISes being stolen in the time scanner here. I think this might be a story about stealing a TARDIS. And there will be a short story titled The Longest Story in the World, and there will also be the beginning. What could it be the beginning of? What beginning could begin when somebody steals a TARDIS? So
Find out. You'll have to find out next time on this show.
Yes. We're going to see what happens if somebody steals a TARDIS and actually gets away with it after doing all these stories where people steal them and fail. This one is going to be one where somebody actually gets away with it. And you will find out who that is next week. But until then, see you later in these time and relative dimensions in space.